lot of things that I've purposefully tried to forget. Growing up, I thought I was going to be a preacher. Thought I was going to be, that's what I wanted to grow up to be, as a preacher. I jokingly say I lived under a rock most of my life, and I really did, even into my adult life, into marriage and everything. And you don't realize that there is a level of traumatic response that kids will pick up at that age that they'll fight when they're in their 40s and 50s.
Most conversations about faith stay on the surface.
Or they just don't happen at all.
And that's the problem.
This is Back Row Revival.
3 guys
Figuring things out in real time.
I'm TJ. I'm not interested in the easy answers. I want to know what actually holds up when life gets hard.
I'm Bucky. I tend to say what people are thinking, even if it makes things a little uncomfortable.
I'm John Mark. I care about truth, but I also care about understanding how we got here in the first place.
No scripts.
No pretending.
No acting like we've got it all figured out.
We talk about faith.
Doubt.
And the stuff most people avoid.
If you've ever felt like you don't quite fit,
Like you're sitting in the back row.
You're not alone.
Back Row Revival.
So do you feel like when you were in the pulpit, that spent time in the pulpit, invited to be in the pulpit, was in the pulpit, were you doing it out of, like you felt like that's what you were supposed to do, or it was what was expected of you?
I felt like both. I felt like I was preparing myself to do something bigger. I was preparing myself to go into full-time pastoring, senior pastor kind of position. And so I needed the experience. And so every time I would get in there, I felt like I was just building experience and building trust with people and that sort of thing. And I think there was a certain point there I felt like I was getting good at the craft. But, it was looking back is like, some of it I feel like was nonsense. Just plainly put. And that was so long ago. You guys are pretty recent out of ministry, comparatively. How long, you guys, 4 or 5 years?
I'm 5 out.
Yeah.
I'm 3.
Yeah, okay. So, I haven't been in a church pulpit since 2012. And so, there's a lot of things that I've purposefully tried to forget of, where I came from with all of that, I thought, growing up, I thought I was going to be a preacher. Thought I was going to be, that's what I wanted to grow up to be, as a preacher. When I was 7 years old, you'd ask me, TJ, what do you be when you grow up? I want to be a preacher.
I feel like in the church, that's kind of like, I don't know, like we all thought that.
It's expected,
Yeah,
maybe.
it's like nobody ever says, I'm going to grow up to be a Sunday school teacher. Or I'm going to grow up to be a really good member. It's always like, even if you feel called to do something more, it's like, I must be called to preach, And then you got a whole bunch of preachers, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. And being called was always about preaching. Being called never was about anything but preaching. I'm called to ministry, and so I'm going to be preaching. I'm going to be pastoring, a senior pastor of a church, or a traveling evangelist, or something like that, or a missionary, And so, you just kind of fall into that. This is where we're going to go with this thing. I was raised very sheltered. You guys had a lot of experience before you became adults with, life, and I jokingly say I lived under a rock most of my life, and I really did, even into my adult life, into marriage and everything. I was very naive, very, blinders on, didn't know anything going on, didn't stay a whole lot into the pop culture stuff. You guys ask about this band and that band, and well, I might have heard their music, but I don't know who they are because I never really was able to just delve into that. I could tell you everything you want to know about CCM music because that's all I was allowed to listen to. And I was barely allowed to listen to that because, Southern gospel, where I came from, where we came from, was the thing, Southern gospel, you got the gold, a Gold City and the Kingsmen and all of that stuff. And so I remember, I'm hopping around, but, I remember when I was like in my dad's church, my mom and dad's church in Westville. And that was like just kind of the beginning of that whole Hosanna Integrity music tape club thing that they had back in the day. And statute of limitations is probably up on that, but Dad would get the
We
tapes.
all owe Colombian
Dad would
music.
get the tapes, run them off on his tape duplicator, and send them back. And so we'd have Lenny LeBlanc tape, one of his tapes, and his music was really good back in the day for worship music. And so I had one of those tapes playing for walk-in music before the service started, just kind of not have the church sound so quiet, because I had seen other churches do that, and I was like, hey, Dad, why don't you have me do that? Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so I mash play on it, and I've got this playing, and this lady stands up and turns around and looks at me and says, that sounds sick, that's of the devil, you need to turn that off now.
Wow.
And it was, I mean, it had a little bit of a drum beat to it. It was not at all
that's because the drum beats in rock music comes from Africa.
Yeah, that's
And
what they
voodoo.
said.
Yeah, witch doctors
And
That's what they
voodoo.
would
all
say.
voodoo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was, but this was more folksy. It was very more of a country sound anyway. But that was all of that. But there was a whole lot of that living under a rock time. My parents didn't get saved until I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old. And they started going to church, and we all started going to church as a family. And they, I don't know if that was an eagle flying out there or not. Sorry, squirrel. But they started going to church in Gentry, Arkansas, an Assembly of God church over there. And they kind of grew there. Dad wanted to grow in that thing, and he was given the position of a youth minister there, and so he did that for a while. And he bought a van. The church didn't have a church van, so he bought a van. It was like a '76 Plymouth Voyager van. It was the short wheelbase van, and it didn't have seats in it. Like, it had one seat behind the two captain seats up front. So it had one bench seat that me and my brother would sit in when we'd go places together. The back of the van is just cargo, because it used to be a floral van. And so in order to take youth group members to events and stuff, he would get folding chairs out of the church and stack them into the back of it. So you go around corners, and then chairs go clank, 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 people are falling into each
That's
other.
funny.
It was great.
Those were the good days.
Yeah. He was doing that, and then a little bit later, about 86, 87, I can't remember which exactly which year. I think it was 86. Yeah, it would have been 86, because I was in 6th grade. And so he was offered a position. He had worked through getting all of his licensing and stuff in the Assemblies of God, and back then it was the Berean course that you would take, and you were given a stack of books, and you'd have to do your test, and you'd mail it off. There was no online nothing back then, of course, and so he'd mail all that off, and he got his license, and a church opened up in Westville. And so he went and tried out, I guess. And I've never understood the whole try out.
Yeah.
The Baptists call it, they speaking before a call or something like that.
View of a call.
View of a call. That's right. Thank you. And so, I was trying out in the Assemblies of God, and I guess in the Church of God too. But he does that, and they did questions and answers. So he did Sunday morning, and then we did a Sunday night, and then they did questions and answers at the end of that thing. And you're only 10 miles from Westville to Siloam Springs, where
15.
we had lived at the time.
Yeah.
And we didn't know anything about the holiness type movement, the holiness type culture until then.
They weren't hard on that in the Gentry Assembly.
They weren't hard on anything like that in the Gentry. I mean, we'd have swimming parties. We'd have doing all kinds of stuff.
Co-ed swimming.
Yeah.
Mixed
Egads.
bathing.
Yeah, we would have all kinds of stuff. Gentry was Gentry and Siloam Springs and all the Arkansas AG churches up in Northwest Arkansas. They were liberal, I guess, but they were free, or whatever you want to call it. And so we go to Westville, and the main question that comes up is, to my mom, do you wear pants?
Of course.
Did she?
Oh, yeah. She's like, well, yeah. And they were like, oh, that's, we don't know about that. She was like, what do you want me to do? And my dad's like, what do you want to be doing? Picking weeds out of the flower garden? And her, skirt riding up, or would you rather her be, And they were like, "Oh, she shouldn't be doing that anyway," Well, then it all came up to, what about your girl, your teenage youth group members, playing volleyball, and should they be wearing dresses and that kind of stuff? And mom and dad were like, "Why is this even a question?" And, but they were very dogmatic about that stuff. And then the mixed bathing, that's what they called it. Did they call that in the Church of God?
Yeah.
They still do.
Yeah, mixed bathing. Where boys and girls couldn't swim together. And what's crazy too, the guys, we like quickly transitioned from being shirt free swimming to the guys had to wear t-shirts when they swam. And like, what's this coming from?
Yeah.
But it was that kind of, those kind of dogmas. We couldn't.
My mom never wore pants.
Really?
My sister never wore pants. My mom never wore jewelry. Didn't wear it. My dad never wore a wedding band. My mom never wore makeup, earrings, none of that stuff.
Wow.
Necklaces.
Still to this day, that all.
No, now my mom does wear some of those things now, but very, very, very conservatively.
Yeah.
But growing up, those were all, big no-nos in Church of God when I was young.
Yeah.
The dogmas that we began to be exposed to back then, though, that really shaped a lot of where things went later on in life, even. Mom and dad, and I don't fault them. And they were like in their, I think they just turned, both of them just turned 30. Like, they're still babies, and they're trying to fit in. They're trying to pastor. They're trying to like figure out how they can, of course, bring the church into the century, but also at the same time they were trying not to rock the boat, and so they were going along with a lot of things because they kind of thought that was how you had to do it, and so there was just a lot of that stuff that just got ingrained in you, going to youth group, and you guys, I don't know if we were on the podcast or if we were talking beforehand, but we were talking about altar calls, and how many altar calls that I don't know. I mean, I wasn't out doing drugs. I wasn't out drinking. I wasn't out having sex. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. But, they would drive those altar calls so hard sometimes, these, especially guest evangelists, that were like, you need to come down. And then for some reason, you felt like all eyes were on you. And you don't know why, but you just felt like it. And it was like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to go down. But you're like just clenching the back of the pew. Like, what in the world is going on here?
Yep.
Just the amount of you're sweating. You're like, they're talking about me here. I mean, they've got to be talking about me, and I don't understand why. And you don't realize that there is a level of traumatic response that kids will pick up at that age that they'll fight when they're in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
It'll still be very relevant to them in their 40s and 50s. I go to therapy regularly. I've been going to therapy for about 3 years now. I've been doing EMDR therapy. I don't know if have you guys heard of EMDR?
Oh, yeah.
It's freaking awesome.
Yeah. It doesn't do anything for me. I make fun of it. I go.
Yeah.
And my wife, I'm because she's into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is it?
So it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So basically, it's in the easiest way to explain it. It's like they are mimicking REM sleep, because REM sleep is when your brain files away and reprocesses and does all of this stuff when you're asleep. And so what they do is they will have you will think about a traumatic event that's happened in your life, something that's just bothers you, and you just like you can't shake it. And you feel the feeling that you feel the feeling that happened then in unrelated events later in life. And so what you learn, what you do is you have that conversation with your therapist. Okay, this is what I can't seem to shake. This feeling that I felt it here, and I want to work on this. And so he will have you talk about that troubling event, talk about how troubling it was, but they will work with you on a level that will teach you how to reprocess this thing. And your brain actually, if done right, your brain will actually reprocess that memory to where it's not you. And I've had several memories that I have gone through with that. And look, I wasn't having issues of things where call the cops or anything like that, of growing up. It was just, somebody saying something and it just hits you wrong and it just stays there,
Yeah.
Mom and dad maybe having a bad day and it just, you hear them yelling at you at that moment,
Yeah.
40 years later, whatever, and so you reprocess it and then, you find later, after doing this that it actually, that feeling goes away and you're not having that feeling when you're, talking to your wife about who needs to take out the garbage. So it's a really, really helpful technique. But anyway, I've had to do some of that for some of those memories, some of those church memories.
And the EMDR has been effective for you?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's really, it's really effective to help me to, because it's not you actively thinking I'm in that moment. You're actively feeling I'm in that moment. Mm-hmm. Your body is actually saying this, and your body feels like it's being chased by a bear, and it's absolutely you're having a conversation with a employee about something that they needed to do differently, and you're all of a sudden feeling like you're being chased by a bear, and you remember, okay, I felt like this on this date. I felt like this back when this happened. So yeah, it's been very, very effective for me. Mm-hmm. But church camps and that kind of stuff. You go to these church camps, and all of my fellow youth group members would be in the altars bawling and crying and stuff, and I'm just like, that part of me won't happen. Like I couldn't make myself cry. Even to this day, I still struggle with like being openly emotional. It's just hard for me to cry. And so, back then it would be like, well, he's not responding because he's not doing what everybody else is doing. I'm responding because I'm actually being very introspective of what's happening.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm connecting with God. I'm maybe praying in that moment, or maybe worshiping in that moment. But it wasn't enough because I wasn't doing what those kids were doing. And so the evangelist would call you out and be like, well, you're the rebellious one because you're fighting against and you're resisting God's, you're resisting the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. When in reality, all you're doing is not conforming.
Yeah.
And doing what everybody else is doing.
Right.
That's the only thing that's really going on there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, so there was a lot of that teenage years, high school years. Mom and dad did their best, and this is nothing against the decisions that they made, but you go from what would be junior high, middle school, to being homeschooled. And then that didn't work out, and so you go to a Christian school because apparently the word on the street was that it was a superior education, and in the homeschooling curriculum. Have you ever heard ACE, Mark?
Brother. Graduated from ACE, my man.
Okay.
With Ace, me and Ace, boy, we made it.
Okay, Ace and Pace and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
1, 2, 3 peaceful way, and yeah.
I cheated a lot.
Oh, I bet. It'd be totally easy to do it.
I go up to sorry, Mom, Dad. I would, and whoever gave me my certificate, but I'll go up to the deal, you go up to the little thing, you grade your own work, slide the answer key into my book, go back to the desk, mark, go back, put it back, go back and sleep for the next hour. My wife, me and Reba dated at that time, and if my mom would get close, she'd wake me up, Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So, yes.
Do you have to wear the God and Country tie?
Oh, my God.
Do you ever know what this is?
I don't.
It's
Slacks
the most
and dress shirts, dressed.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, and back in the day, that was when the mullets and all that stuff were in for the haircuts, and so you couldn't have that kind of haircut. You had to have the white wall shaved head. That's cool now, but they would be against it now, I guess, because it's cool. But anyway. They had this ugly clip-on tie that the guys would have. You'd have to wear a blue Oxford shirt. It had to be the Oxford style hot and sweaty shirt, always showed sweat rings, and so here you are, this boy going through puberty, and you're just sweating like all over the thing,
Chapel service
chapel
every week.
services, and the school that I went to was ran by independent fundamentalist Baptists, and those guys don't play. And you're talking about dogmas; those guys got them, and it's King James only. It's a lot of that stuff. And so the principal, he would for chapel, he would preach hard, like I'm talking guttural screaming preaching to elementary students.
I was actually kicked out of Christian school.
Okay.
Yeah, and my mom was the teacher, and my dad was the principal. I was removed from that Christian school and had to homeschool for a while.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
So who homeschooled you?
I don't remember that.
Was it your
part.
mom and dad that kicked you out of the Christian school and then homeschooled you at home?
I was a bad influence on the rest of the kids. Something happened.
You still are. I feel like you're a bad influence on me quite a bit.
Dang PKs.
Yeah, so I can't remember. I think I went to stay with my grandparents for a little while on a farm, and I did my work and kind of helped my grandpa had knee surgery during that time, helped take care of the farm and stuff. But I had done some. So I got in some trouble, and so I was like, Dad, I feel like you should just send me to the farm. I get better there. I was just trying to offer a solution that didn't get me in more trouble. But yeah.
Oh my gosh.
ACE. Oh
so
my
yeah,
gosh.
so I did that through my sophomore year of school, and then that school actually, I think I told you the other day that my mom and dad pulled me out, but no, that school folded up. They had a big blow up in the church and all that stuff. The church split, and so we ended up going. I ended up going back to public school for my junior and senior year. My brother, he ended up going to a school over in Fayetteville. I forget what it was called. Was it Micah Academy? Does that sound right?
I don't know, man.
Something like that. There's some Christian academy that was over there in Fayetteville. It was a little bit more educational focused, and so he went over there, and then I finished school at Westville High School, and so but when I came in, I was behind on everything, like science, math, English. I was in
especially science, huh?
Yeah, it was, I mean, we ain't dissecting no frogs in an ACE.
Yeah, right.
What were you driving in high school? Because I remember what I remember, but I don't remember.
It was a 72 Dodge Dart Swinger.
That's right.
That's a slant six. And let me tell you about how naive I was.
Okay.
I had a CB radio in that car.
Okay.
And what am I going to pick for my what am I going to pick for my handle? The Swinger.
The Swinger.
The Swinger.
Oh man.
I didn't get it till I was 30.
Breaker.
Hey, this is the Swinger, and they're like, what? My granddad would be like, he was a truck driver until he retired, and he would call me out on the radio, and hey TG, how you doing? He would never call me my handle. Yeah, those were good times. But yeah, that was what I drove. I had a slant six engine in it. I think that had all of 170 horsepower. It made some racket, but that was about all it had. And, I had that car for quite a while. I had that car until right before we moved to New Jersey. Mom and Dad. So after so long, so Mom and Dad took that church in 86 or so, and then they resigned that church in about 93, was it 93, 92? So it was towards the end of 92, I think, is when they resigned. And Dad wanted to plant a church. He felt the call to plant a church up in New Jersey. To this day, I say that was one of the best things he's ever done. Like, I think that was like
New Jersey?
Yeah. That church there was and it's still going. That church is thriving. I mean,
Nice.
that's a jewel in the guy's crown. You know, he did phenomenal with that thing. And so when they moved up there before I graduated, I stayed with grandma, and then I ended up selling that car, and then later I bought that car back.
Oh, really?
Drove it to New Jersey. I bought it in our back from the guy that I sold it to in Arkansas. I drove it to New Jersey. The next day I get up to go to work, and I pull out and I turn left where I thought I had a protected left, and I hit somebody and trashed the car. But I fixed it and drove it to college and all that stuff. So yeah,
Golly,
that's what that car was.
Wow.
That was fun. I've got a picture actually of that. I'll show it to you guys later.
Okay. I just remember that it was unique. That's why that something had hung up in my memory that it was a unique car.
Yeah, nobody wanted a Dodge Dart with a slant six.
Right. Nobody.
The swinger.
Yeah, I was the swanger.
Just the swinging.
Yeah, so yeah, through high school, my dad pastored. You know, tried to be involved in the youth group, and you know, there was still a lot of dogmas and stuff in the church. Mom and dad got less dogmatic over time. They matured. You know, and that was really what was happening, and they focused on what mattered, which was people. And you know, they did. I mean, I think they did a phenomenal job there in Westville, and people will still to this day say they did. You know, and so after they moved to New Jersey, I stayed there for a little while, and then they dragged me up there kicking and screaming because I didn't want to go at that point, because I'm finally making what I felt like were lifelong friends there in school. And you know, when you're graduating, you know, everybody gets all sappy and stuff. You know, you know how that goes. And so that was kind of,
It's all lies.
yeah, it's all lies. I think you're probably the only person from that era that I still talk to.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
And we were not friends in that
No,
era.
I mean,
we didn't
no.
even really know each other in that era.
no, we knew of each other. I think we hung a couple of times when you'd come over and hang with Alan and Chris sometimes over down the street there. But yeah, I mean, it was it's just crazy how things change like that. But after I got up to New Jersey, and I was sowing as Wild of Oats as a guy that was sheltered, calling himself the swinger could sow, you know. And sowing those wild oats just, I mean, it only involved, you know, making out with a girl, but never going all the way. And it always involved like
full swing,
going and hanging out with friends till like forever. And maybe they're drinking, but I'm not, you know. And and so it was that kind of stuff. Well, before we moved back to New Jersey, Mom and Dad came back, and it was right before graduation. They came back for a few weeks, and they actually pulled me out of school one day. Like, we need you to come with us. Like, they had me called up to the principal's office there at Westville, and so I met them, and they were like, "Hey, we want you to come with us to the church." Like, okay, well, what are we going to do? We want to talk to you. Oh Lord. Okay, so we ride over to the church, and they get the key. They got the keys. Dad had already resigned the church, so they got the keys from the new pastor. And we go in, and they walk me up to the altar, and they sit down and start counseling with me and talking to me about how Wild of Oats I'm sowing, and how, you know, I'm listening to some bad music, and you know, I've got country music on all of the buttons in my car, and you know, I mean. And you look back, and I'm laughing at this, and back then I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I'm in trouble for this, you know? And I'm thinking back in the day, I'm like, wow. And so, you know, and I've talked about this open, and we laugh about it now, but you know, they do all this and stuff, but they were convinced that I was on drugs and I was drinking and doing all this stuff, and I was too afraid to. I was too naive to do all that stuff. Again, CB handle swinger. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to do pot if I tried, you know. I'd probably try to snort it, you know. I don't know. And so, you know, just some funny times, you know, back then. Once I got up to New Jersey, I kind of calmed down. It got me a job. I was working full time, my first full time job, and you know, pretty happy with it. And I got involved in a church that was not the church that Mom and Dad planted, because they hadn't actually started their church yet, and so I was going to church at another place where I'd kind of connected with some people, some friends, and in all that connection, I felt like that whole call to ministry was coming back up. And there was like 3 of us there that were there at the same time, and we all 3 kind of felt that same. Of course, we were feeding off of each other and doing all of that. And so the 3 of us, we decided we were going to go to Bible college. And so there was no internet. You couldn't. Well, there was the internet, but we didn't have it. It was in its very early forms, and so none of the things you wanted to find out about a Bible college was online anyway. So, but I ended up choosing a Bible college in Ohio, led by Rod Parsley, was a big TBN televangelist. He was on a lot of TV stations around the world and all of that. He was not. No, he was non-denominational. He started out Baptist.
Did he?
Yeah, and he was non-denominational, Pentecostal, charismatic, Word of Faith.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how heavy he leaned into Word of Faith until I moved out there and went to college out there, and then realized he was all into the seed faith stuff and name it, claim it type.
That was very popular in that area.
It was very popular, but his church was busting out the seams, and so you felt like you were at the right place.
Yeah.
And, it was a very shucking and bucking type church. I mean, it was every church service. There was, the whole, whatever you call it, the praise break, all that stuff going on. And the amount of influence that had on me back then, and if there's any thread I would put into where I was at from then on in ministry, I was heavily influenced. I was easily influenced, should I say, by those that I was surrounded by. And so I would just take it all, hook, line, and sinker. I would just go, wouldn't question anything. I just, whatever the guy says, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to write it down. He does every year still to this day. He did this thing called Resurrection Seed Offering, where everybody on Easter Sunday gives their biggest offering they've ever given. And he'd raise like millions on a Sunday morning, even back in the 90s, And, in the way they try to drive you to is to be able to give a week's income on that offering. And so I was like, I'm going to do this because, the man's saying that I'm going to be wealthy if I do this kind of stuff. If I give sacrificially, God's going to bless me. And I'm going to sow and I'm going to reap. I'm going to reap big. And so what did I do? I wrote a check for about the size of a week's income, which was about $140 because I was working part-time as a college student there. And I'll never forget it. 2 days later, the check bounced because I didn't have the money. But I mean, that was the kind of, just blind influence that you start to get into, especially in that kind of circle. I started dating a girl I had no business dating, and, was involved in all kinds of crazy stuff there. And then, ended up actually dropping out of college about a year and a half in. It was a 2-year college. And so, I couldn't pay the tuition. I couldn't keep up with it, and so I just kind of gave up on that. Ended up breaking up with her. I ended up taking a job and going to church again, just trying to get myself like steady somewhere doing something. And an opportunity came up not long after that to go and interview to be a youth pastor down in South Arkansas. And that was my first youth pastorate position. I took that position, and
where was that at?
It was in Monticello.
Monticello.
Yeah. And it was in, 96, 97, 96, I guess is when it was.
And was it an AG church?
It was an AG church.
Did those teachings go with you?
Oh, yeah.
Flowed with you?
Oh, yeah. And and you go to an Assembly of God church in South Arkansas with that, their teaching and their dogmas, and especially their way of what the pastor says goes no matter what. He don't answer to no board. He doesn't, all that tyrant type. I mean, you look at the guy's ministry now, and I'm not doing this to try to burn him down, but it's just well known. He is not someone who will just take feedback from anybody. It's what he says is going to be. And so I go down there and I'm like, well, it should be that way everywhere, And so me and the pastor there bumped heads quite a bit about a lot of that stuff because, he would have to go to the board for things. And I was like, why are you going to the board? You're the pastor. You're the man of God. You're the visionary for this place, using all that terminology that they had up there. Right. And Rod Parsley this, Rod Parsley that. And he's like, dude, just chill. I'm not Rod Parsley, and I had to have he had to have a lot of conversations with me to chill me out from that stuff. And, there was just a lot of stuff that happened in that church. Those people were beautiful people, wonderful people there. That pastor there, he was just good as gold to me. Wanted to teach me everything that he wanted me to learn. It was gave me his pulpit once a month to preach in, and would pull me aside and say, "Son, I saw your notes. I don't know how you even kept a thought straight thinking of that. It's a wonder you struggle. It's no wonder you struggle with that one.
Was you heavily influenced by any mainstream preacher?
Not really. No, I would watch them back early on in my salvation. I like to watch TD Jakes back then. I would watch Hagee quite a bit. Dabbled with Kenneth Copeland and Jesse Duplantis, but found out really early on that those guys are a couple of shysters and liars and thieves. But I didn't have an influence. I would say that the only person that influenced me as heavily as Rod Parsley did was my own pastor, Robert Gilman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If I tried to emulate anybody, I tried to emulate him.
Yeah.
I was heavily influenced by like teacher style preachers like Kyle Ottoman.
Okay.
Was a real heavily influenced, and even early Mark Driscoll. The way that he presented and taught, and those kind of like
that's where you get your meanness from.
Oh yeah, not from Mark Driscoll, but from Kyle Ottoman maybe. But I really gravitated toward that conversational teaching, preaching, because I just felt like it was just much more, learning from that.
I kind of grew out of that for a little while there. That church, that pastor ended up resigning, going to another church, and then another pastor came in, and we didn't see eye to eye about anything, and it wasn't anything to do with Rod Parsley. It was just the fact that he wanted me to use puppets in my youth group, and there was a lot of just silly stuff that was just not.
I wish I had a puppet right now.
Yeah, man, I love puppets.
Just for this podcast.
I love puppets. No, don't get me wrong. I can rock some puppets, but. They would do things just way different. It was just not my cup of tea, and they were kind to me. They were very good people to me, but we were not going the same direction. Yeah. And that's where I met married my wife, and we moved immediately after because they're just a long story. We couldn't continue to be in ministry at that church anyway if we had pursued a relationship, and so we eloped. We did the natural thing and eloped, and then resigned the next day and moved up to New Jersey and helped my dad for a little while. And bless her heart, my wife was not a city girl. She moved from South Arkansas. Had never lived outside of South Arkansas, and I take her up to the armpit of suburbia, just outside of New York City.
Mm-hmm. So you were over in the newer Hoboken area?
We were just south of there in the Old Bridge Township, just south of Raritan Bay.
Okay.
And so she didn't last long there at all, and we ended up agreeing that we were going to find a place. We were going to look for churches to get involved in that were closer to halfway between both families. And we settled in Kentucky and ended up at a church that was in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. And we put the majority of our ministry time there.
So you were on staff there?
I was on staff as a youth pastor and media director. Like, started out as a youth pastor, and then, that crazy full circle, that pastor just absolutely loved Rod Parsley.
Now, when you say media director, you're talking about changing the transparencies on the overhead thing.
I migrated us from that.
Yeah.
They
Remember that?
Yeah, they
And the funny thing is, when those things first come out, the old timers was against them. They thought it was of the devil.
The sing off the wall. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the one-eyed devil that is shooting pictures on the wall.
Yeah. But yeah, that pastor there, he was absolutely Rod Parsley was it for him, and he felt like that he wanted to be on TV. He wanted to start a TV ministry. Now that church was doing really good things. They were feeding the hungry. We had a monthly food distribution where we had a grocery distribution of about 400 families every month. And this is a church of 120 people. They bus in kids on Wednesday nights for kind of a big Wednesday night kids night, and you'd have over 100 kids in the sanctuary, like just rocking. And they did a lot of you remember Willie George?
Oh yeah,
Church on the Move.
Tulsa.
They did a lot of his stuff on Wednesday nights, and they did it really well. So anyway, the next thing he wanted to do was try to build a TV ministry and stuff. And so I was like, hey, having been from World Harvest, we can do this thing. And I learned how to edit video. I learned how to make video. Learned how to do all of the graphics, and just one of those things that I just gravitated towards. And so that was where the media thing came into. Fast forward a few years, and we built a new building, we do all that stuff, and then my kids are born. I've got triplets, as you guys know. Some of y'all don't know, but I've got triplets, and so they were born, and we had to move away. Because we had to get back to close to family for help, because we didn't feel like that we could do it on our own. It's a lot, and so we moved to Arkansas, close to her family, and the we got there, and we were keeping our heads above water. I ended up taking a job at a cable company to make their TV ads, because I knew how to do video production. And it was one day the internet guy quits, and the owner, he walks in, and he's got his socks on, because that's how he walked around the office, was just in his socks. And he walks in and wiggles his toes, and he says, well, the internet guy just quit. You seem to be pretty good on those computers. Why don't you want to give it a shot? What's it mean? It meant a better position and stuff. And it's like, yeah, great. So my first day on the job, I created a whole town outage, knocked everybody offline. But there are times, and you guys talk about these times that God spoke to you. I can't really say. There may have been some times that he had, but there are times that are just more poignant to me. Was when I've asked for his help and I got it, and that was one of those times. And I feel like that was more pivotal to me than anything I ever did in ministry. Because I needed that job, I needed that vocation, and I did not realize it would put me in the course to where I am today. But I just closed the door, and I just said, God, you're going to have to show me how to do this, because I know nothing about this stuff. Mm-hmm. And from that day on, it was all in, like finding information, learning, and it just was clicking just all the way through, Wow. And
it's awesome.
And so, I'm building this side career, but I also had a desire to do ministry still. I'm out of full-time ministry, but I'm helping in the youth group there at the church that I used to youth pastor in. There's now a new pastor there. There's now a new youth pastor there. And so I'm just helping the youth pastor with the music and that kind of thing. But I really, kind kind of felt a passion to get back in all in, but there was just nowhere for me to do that there.
And so just to make sure I'm tracking with you, this is back in the Monticello area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is at that original church in Monticello,
Right.
you know.
Okay.
And so we were there for about 3 years, and we get a call from the old pastor at the church in Shepherdsville, and we'd stayed in touch with them and stuff, and he was like, why don't you find a job up here and come back? We can use you here. I can't pay you, but we can use you here, and so that just rang out to both of us, and so we moved back, and I found a job, which actually was the beginnings of the company that I'm still working for today. And it all kind of took off from there on the job front. I started growing way more in the job front than I was in ministry, but I was also getting a lot of opportunity in the pulpit in ministry there than I'd ever had, in that church. I was given a lot of authority in that church. I was given a lot of leeway to do things. I was over the Sunday experience, more or less. He would just show up and preach. I would run the meetings and get the plans together. He would lay out what he's going to preach about, and then we would create the theme and make it all go. But the power that I felt like I had, which wasn't that big of a church, but the amount of momentum that we had and the amount of just energy that we had and everything, it just made me just go so far into that thing. It was just like gas pedal all the way to the floor, and like,
all gas, no brakes.
And it didn't matter who I ran over. It didn't matter who I left behind, and some of that was my family. And it's like, I put so much of my emphasis and my focus on what was happening there because of the anointing, because of this apostolic anointing that's on the pastor, and all the things, all the jargon that we all bought back in the day. And again, remember, I was heavily influenced. I was easily influenced by things like that, and so I would just go all in because, hey, this is what you do, and this is it. Clearly, people are responding, and so we're gonna just keep going with this thing. This has got to be the right thing to do, and things weren't right at home. Things weren't right in me, and I was just like, I would be so frustrated because I felt like I was having to perform on the stage on a level that I didn't have at home. And I was always like so down on myself, so hard on myself. Like I would be like, why is it I can't pray with my family with the fervor that I pray with people in church? Why can't I pray with my wife? And maybe why can't I do a devotional with my wife on a regular basis? And it just wasn't.
Yeah, that's true. I get that.
You know what I mean? I mean, it was a long time before I got over that guilty feeling, but as time went on, it was about 2010. I just hit a breaking point, and a lot of the breaking point was I started asking questions. I was starting to de-influence myself. I wasn't really deconstructing really yet because I didn't know that was a thing, but I was de-influencing myself from a lot of things. And I started hearing things being said that I used to just shout down. I used to be amening, and I would be like, wait a minute, I don't think I agree with that. I don't think I like that. And you'd hear things that would be said that would be like, if you leave this church without our blessing, then you're leaving God's will for your life, and you'll never succeed past that, that act of disobedience. And I was like, wait a minute, that ain't right. That can't be right. And that kind of stuff came up, and then you'd hear people's personal stories being used in the pulpit, not just by the pastor there, but by visiting pastors. You'd hear visiting pastors come and be telling personal stories of people that they'd counseled in the past, and it would be like, I don't think those people would have given their permission for that to be said. Right. And I just was like, I don't want nothing to do with it anymore. I don't want to be that story anymore. And I may be still that story to this day. I don't know. but I was just like, I can't let myself be in that position, and I can't let my family mostly be in that position. And so I met with that pastor, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm stepping down. I'm stepping out. I've got to focus on my marriage. I've got to focus on my family. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to be a Christian. We're going to find somewhere else to go. We're going to work on our marriage. We were struggling pretty bad because I had focused so much on ministry and had neglected what was happening in my marriage so much. It's like, to this day, there's damage caused by that era of my life, and other times, of course later, but, I just, it was, it felt like at that time, the hardest thing to do, because I knew that was really the last real hurrah. We tried to do some ministry a little bit later with a little startup there in the town that we had moved to from there. And tried to do, like, they were a Sunday night youth only ministry, and they were wanting to do something to reach out to the parents, and so they asked us to help them with the Sunday morning service for those people. And so we did that, and then we started noticing most of the people were coming from our old church, and so we were like, we don't want to be that. We don't, a couple of people, that's fine, but when most of the room, you look around and like, I know all of these people from our old church and only from our old church.
Yeah.
It was time to, we'd had a talk with them, and they agreed. They were like, yeah, we see this is not good either. So let's, it's not meeting the purpose. And so we shut it down. That was the last time I preached in a pulpit. That's the last time the amount of freedom that I got out of being done with all of that, like literally being done, was just unreal. It was not having to get up and pretend anymore, not having to get up and perform anymore. And I never put it in the frame of performance until a few years later. I'm on the stage at a community play, and we had moved back to Monticello, Arkansas. Again, this would be the third time we'd moved to Monticello, Arkansas. So in 2013, we moved back because my old boss at the cable company, again, calls me up and he says, hey, I'm going to make an offer you can't refuse. I want you to run my operation for me. And so we moved down there, and, that was just, career-wise, it was good for me. Family-wise, it was the worst thing for me.
So you should have stayed in Shepherdsville.
Probably should have.
Okay.
Yeah. It was bad. It was bad for everything, But when we got there, there was a few good, happy memories, and the one thing was the community play, because they had like the Wizard of Oz, and we were all going to go audition as a family. Well, two of the family members decided they were going to not do that, and so it was me and two of the kids. Two of the kids were Munchkins then in this Wizard of Oz play. So my son is the mayor of Munchkin City, and then my daughter is one of the Lollipop Guild, and then somehow I didn't even try out for the part, but I get selected for Professor Marvel and the Wizard of Oz, which they're, as you know, they're one and the same, and I freaking owned that. I am Oz, it was, I had the time of my life, and I did sound for it because, why not? Because I'm the guy behind the curtain. So yeah. I'm up there actually doing the voice of the wizard from the sound booth.
That's great.
I'm on stage acting for some of the parts and stuff, for like, especially the part where Professor Marvel meets Dorothy and stuff. But anyway, through that whole experience there, I'm on the stage and I'm like in character, and it just hit me. I felt the same way preaching. I felt like, and the crowd is laughing. I'm like getting them. I'm like really, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I had that same high that I had preaching.
It's deep.
And I realized, wow, it wasn't so much that it was a problem with me bringing the spirituality home. I was performing.
Yeah.
I was me at home. I was who I was. I would pray with the kids. I'd do their bedtime prayers at night. I would pray with them when they were sick. I would do all the things. It wasn't forced. I would pray with my wife when she was sick, and that's, I would always, but my prayer life had never been one of those, I'm going to pace the floor and, shuck and buck and rattle in tongues for hours.
Right.
I wanted that.
Exactly.
I could never.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my prayer time was play some worship music and meditate and just think on it, and a lot of times it would be just driving down the road, just kind of talking, and I felt so guilty because I wasn't like, the guy on the pulpit is always seen as that's the model of Christianity.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And you guys lived that. You guys lived that where, you had to be that model of Christianity on that pulpit. And people are like thinking, hey, well, he's perfect and he's got all of this right, all this together and stuff. And they never are allowed to see the fight at home,
right?
Or to see the fact that you just got frustrated with your kids and yelled at them, they didn't need it, or you kicked the dog, or just you broke a dish because you were just frustrated, you cussed at the car because you couldn't get the bolt loose, Yeah.
I wonder how many other people. Have you ever listened to a preacher who, when they talk, it's one voice, but then when they go to preach, their voice automatically changed to preacher voice? Yep. It drives me nuts. It's almost like they're doing what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They're getting ready to now I'm going to become the preacher me. Mm-hmm. And I would not do that. Mm-hmm. I would refuse to. Yeah. I'm going to talk. I'm going to preach the way I talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so part of my manuscripting process was making sure that it's written how I talk, and not in no other way. Mm-hmm. So that drove. Yeah,
I started to do that because it was out of performance. I was trying to perform, and I can spot it a mile away now. I mean, there's performative preachers. This is an act. This is this is theater. So. It's what this is, and but you guys asked each other, would you ever go back? Never. Mm-hmm. In a heartbeat, I would never. Yeah. I don't. That's not in me anymore. This is in me. Yeah. Having conversations with people that I care about, and having deep conversations about faith, and how God touched my heart, or how, I can't deny that God has touched my heart many times in my life. I can't deny God's blessings. If I have any doubt of God's blessings, I got to look at my triplets. Mm-hmm. If I have any doubt of God's blessings, I've got to look at that mountain right across the road that is just absolutely gorgeous, breathtaking.
Right. Absolutely.
I have been more worshipful with God by enjoying His nature in the last 2 years than I've ever understood it. Yeah. Like getting out and just going for a walk and enjoying the sunshine and the fresh air, and just being like, this is living. This is God made this. Right. This is, and that's where I'm touched. That, there's things I'm not willing to get into in this show, but there's things going on in my life that people would think you should be falling apart right now. But I know that, I always kind of remember a friend of mine, actually, I was going through some things then that I thought was really bad then, but it's no. And he looked at me one time. He said, "Man, you're gonna be all right." I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "No, look at me." He said, "You're right there in God's hand. He's got you. It's okay."
Mm-hmm. And one thing that you said that kind of resonates with me is that I remember when the production was the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And even like getting a call from a member who needed prayer or something annoyed me. Yeah. When I was in the midst of preparing for what I felt was the most important. Mm-hmm. Was the Sunday production. Yeah. The sermon or the notes and the this and the that.
If that Sunday service don't go right, nothing's going right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was some of the moments when I realized that, man, this, the people should be most important. Yeah. Obviously. Right. But for me, it was always the production.
In the recent years, I got back into church production stuff, like doing sound and stuff. And I literally love to do sound. I love to mix audio, love to make it sound. I love the sounds of modern worship. I feel like that it's out of place, though. It belongs in a concert, the way that modern worship sounds right now. Mm-hmm. But I got so involved in it, like I I can manufacture that today. Like, I'm like thinking, gosh, I mean, all I got to do is get the lights whirling right. I got to get the sound just right. And, people won't know the difference anymore. And I had to take another step back from that stuff because it was like, I'm the guy that, again, once more, I'm the guy encouraging people to do this thing. And, like I was in ministry, the time before last, I was encouraging that pastor to go maybe a little bit bigger than he should have been going. Maybe we don't need to build that building so big. And instead, I was the guy like, hey, we can build it bigger. We might as well, we're already there. We might as well spend the extra $20,000 to do this choir loft up there like Rob Parsley has. And, just all of these things, and thinking back, sometimes people need to hear, they need to hear the restraint. Mm-hmm. They need to hear that voice of restraint.
Mm-hmm. Voice of, yeah.
And
I agree.
And so I'm really bad about dreaming big and getting excited about big things and encouraging that stuff. So I just like, I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it anymore, So that's always a challenge for me though. This is not, wanting to jump back into doing something I like to do like that. I want to find some other venue to do it. Maybe find a worship concert that needs a sound guy or something, but I can't stomach the way the church is done right now.
I've seen this video on YouTube, and I think it was some Church of Christ conference or something. Had to be, because there was no music.
Wow.
No music. Just a guy behind a pulpit that all of a sudden started singing a hymn, and the whole congregation started singing it. And I thought, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah.
No music, no nothing, just the voices singing a hymn. Yeah, it was pretty powerful.
It's straight up beautiful to hear that over the concert environment.
I agree.
Me and my kids went to Lutheran church for Easter. I don't know if I even told you guys about the experience with that.
You didn't. You said you enjoyed it and you were going to tell us about it.
So having come from the whole Pentecostal charismatic experience where. We've got to have a high. We've got to have the crescendo. We've got to have the hype, and we've got to get people energized in that collective effervescence, and so that they feel like the Holy Spirit's been here. So we go to this Catholic church, and they open it up with this great big pipe organ piece. But the
Lutheran, not Catholic, right?
Yeah, it's a Lutheran church. Yeah, okay. The congregation is singing like as loud as the pipe organ. Mm-hmm. And they go to the next song, and the congregation is singing. They have 4 singers over there. The music, the instruments, and the singers are in like you got this pie-shaped room is what this church was like. This section over here was where the instruments and the singers were. It was just a piano and an organ, and piano, the pipe organ, and 4 vocalists. And I think they had a guitar player too that was just playing along. The 4 vocalists there were just to support the congregation and get them going because the congregation carried it.
Yeah, that's
and awesome. I'm talking like tears in your eyes. Like I'm not demonstratively emotional, but that brought tears to my eyes because I was like, this is what it should be.
You're saying that in heaven, Chris Tomlin ain't going to be leading worship?
I don't think so. Mayonnaise guy, no.
So it's going to sound like in heaven, right?
Yeah.
Just the multitude of nations just singing.
Everybody,
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, there's a contrast between where it's just all of a sudden gone. And I think we'll probably dive into that on some of our episodes. Sure. The contrast of where it's gone to really, what really are we doing here? Mm-hmm. So...
Right.
That's questions I'm always asking. So I'm constantly questioning. Like you guys were talking. One of the baptism of the Holy Spirit and all of that. I questioned that years ago, and I've kind of settled down where I believe in that. And same thing with rapture, and just all of the different things. And so, looking forward to diving into some of that stuff.
Definitely.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Thanks for your story.
Thanks for letting me be a part of the ride.
It's only getting started.
Yeah. The back row's getting warm.